Hey Chaotic Crew, Brian here, and we're back with the last of the 4 Final Fantasy Precons. We're going to review it and then choose 10 cards to take out, 10 cards to put back in, and kind of go from there. Make sure to like the video if you enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you would take out, what you would put in the deck. And also, don't forget to subscribe if you like the content. We're going to keep this up with all the precons, with a bunch of commanders from this Final Fantasy set, so make sure you stop by for that. But this deck, though, Counter Blitz, is a Bant counters deck. It kind of goes in a few different directions here. You've got a lot of cards that synergize with +1/+1 counters. You've got a lot of cards that synergize with maybe the summons, the new summon creature type from... it's not really creature type, but the creature sagas, right, from this set have been really cool. And so there's a few different ways you can go with the deck. Titus works with every one of them, which is great. He's a 3/3 for 3. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. So it also has whenever one or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate. Do this only once each turn. So it doesn't matter how many players you hit, you can only proliferate once per turn. But pretty cool there. It works great with 1/1 counters to spread it across your team, right? If you have one creature that makes it a bunch, or you can even move some lore counters from these, creature sagas onto Titus, and then now whenever he deals damage, you can proliferate. Lots of cool things you can do. But the creatures, one of the craziest reprints in a precon deck, Walking Ballista, just fantastic to enter with a bunch of +1/+1 counters, and then you can remove the counters to deal damage to any target. Nice to have. It doesn't do a ton of work in this deck, but there is an infinite combo. If you like that, keep it in. If you don't like that, remove it for some value. Maybe use it as a value trade or put it in one of your more competitive decks, right? Duskshell Crawler is a fantastic reprint as well. Love the new art here too. Pretty much just puts a 1/1 counter on a creature and then gives creatures with +1/+1 counters trample. Grateful Apparition, another way to proliferate in the deck. Gyre Sage is a great ramp piece, right? Gonna give green mana for each 1/1 counter on it, and it has evolved, so going to get it pretty quickly. Incubation Druid taps for any mana that a land you control could produce, but it also, in a +1/+1 counter deck is really great because when it has a 1/1 counter, it can tap for 3 mana of any type, so very cool there. Next up is a new card, Lord Jiskel Guado. 2 mana for a 2/1 Spirit Cleric, relevant creature types. Flying, at the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, investigate. So this is kind of a cool way to draw cards in the deck, right? Giving you some pseudo card advantage. Pretty cool if you're running decks that care about artifacts, or maybe you need some more card draw. That can be good as well. Waka, Traveling Merchant, 2 mana for a 1/2 new card as well, and you can tap to remove a counter from a non-land permanent you control to draw a card. This works really great with these creature enchantments that maybe you want to continuously leave on the battlefield, but also re-trigger their abilities. So that's really cool too. Scholar of New Horizons, pretty similarly, it enters with a 1/1 counter on it, and then you can tap to remove a counter from a permanent you control, search your library for planes and reveal it. If an opponent controls more lands than you, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't put it on the battlefield, you put it into your hand. So you're either ramping or mana fixing a little bit. And it's any planes, it's not a basic plane, so you can search for a tri-land or for a dual land and go from there. Shalinda, Yevon Acolyte. 2 mana for a 2/2 lifelinker. Whenever another creature you control enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature if its power is less than Shalinda's power. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on Shalinda. So, very cool card right here. Does a lot of work. It puts counters on other creatures and itself. So great to have for Titus, and you can always move some counters around if you need to with Titus's ability. So you can always make sure the counters go on the creatures you want them to go to. Chasm Skulker is a fantastic reprint. We do draw a few cards in this deck, so it is going to get big. And when it dies, you're going to make a bunch of tokens that are good blockers, so good to have there. Gata and Luzu is a 3 mana 1/1 with Flash. When it enters, choose target creature you control. If damage will be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage put that many 1/1 counters on it. So this is pretty good. This is part of that infinite combo in the deck with Walking Ballista and another card there. Pretty interesting way to protect your creature, and I think it's neat in the deck. Generous Patron is always fun. When it enters, you support 2, and whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature you don't control, draw a card. So this is fun, a little cheeky if you can find a way to put maybe some of your lore counters onto your opponent's creatures, or if you're giving them -1/-1 counter, Generous Patron is a really great card. If you're giving them +1/+1 counters, it's not as good because they're buffing your opponent's creatures, but if you can find a way to give your opponent's counters that don't really do anything, that's kind of when Generous Patron shines the most. Lulu is also a new card, 2/3 for 3 mana. Whenever an opponent attacks you, choose a target creature attacking you, put a stun counter on that creature. So that would be a great reason that Generous Patron is really good. And if you're putting stun counters on your opponent's creatures, that's solid. And then you pay 4 mana to proliferate, so really strong there. And yeah, so that's something you can also proliferate with your commander, and it's very, very solid. Meister Seymour, 3 mana for a 1/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Meister Seymour's power on another target creature you control. And then it has 5 Monstrosity X, where X is the number of counters among creatures you control. So can really buff himself up if needed. And yeah, very cheap card to get on the battlefield. It's going to put counters every turn on a creature, so pretty strong. Riku, Resourceful Guardian, 3 mana for a 2/3. If you put 1 or more counters on a creature until end of turn, that creature can't be blocked by creatures your opponents control. So great way for, your commander triggered to proc, and make sure you get in and draw a card and proliferate. Also has Steal for 1 mana and tap. Move a counter from target creature an opponent controls on a target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So that's kind of cool too. If you do end up putting a +1/+1 counter on your opponent's creature with Generous Patron, maybe draw a card, then you can pay 1 and tap it with the Riku to get it back onto your creature. That's kind of a cool way to do it. And really just helps deal with opponents' 1/1 counter decks. But it's a way to have Riku potentially put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control, but it's not guaranteed, right? I wouldn't count this card as like putting 1/1 counters on your creatures. It just synergizes with it really well. Summon Ixion. Here's a brand new enchantment creature, Saga. 3 mana for a 3/3 with First Strike, and it has 3 lore counter abilities. So when it first enters, you're going to exile target creature and opponent controls until this Saga leaves the battlefield. Which isn't super long, but if you're using Tidus's ability or, other creature abilities in this deck, you can actually keep this on the battlefield for a bit longer. Then you can, 2 to put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 2 target creatures you control, and you gain 2 life. And that it's also 3, right? So you don't really want to put the counters on this unless you think, maybe 1 counter on this one. But it works really well with your commander because it has the lore counters, which is great, but it also has the +1/+1 counter. So it works both ways with how the deck really wants to go. And it's a cheap body, so pretty great to have there. Tireless Tracker is a fun reprint, investigating whenever a land enters, and then when you sacrifice a clue, you get a 1/1 counter on them. A couple of investigate cards in this deck. I don't know how well they really fit in. I mean, it's nice to have extra things to put your mana into if you do have too much mana, like these clue tokens. But in my thought, clue tokens aren't really amazing unless you are synergizing with them in some way. There's not really a ton of that in the deck. But moving on, we have Tremel, Seymour's Butler, 3 mana for a 2/3. Each other non-token creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Which is great, and then you pay 1 and tap it to proliferate X times, or X is the number of non-token creatures you control that entered this turn. So that's something good to know. You can probably maybe proliferate once or twice, so pretty neat card right there as well. Altered Ego is a reprint of a clone. You can pay X into to have it enter with X additional +1/+1 counters. Auron, Venerated Guardian is a brand new card, 4 mana 2/5 with Vigilance. And whenever Auron attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it. When you do, exile a target creature defending player controls with power less than Auron's power until Auron leaves the battlefield. So definitely we'll get a bit of a target put on him, unless you can exile tokens, I guess. But it's very good to have him. He gets very big defensive-wise, and then he stays in the battlefield like combat-wise, but he will be targeted with some removal, so something to keep in mind there. Chocobo Knights is pretty neat. 4 mana for a 3/3. Whenever you attack, creatures you control with counters on them gain double strike until end of turn. So having double strike is nice. You would think it would trigger your commander's ability twice, but it doesn't because you can only do it once each turn. But still, giving all your creatures double strike is very cool there. Fathom Mage, great reprint here to draw some cards. Forgotten Ancient, also a great reprint to get a bunch of woman counters on a single creature. Or a bunch of woman counters onto all your creatures if you prefer that as well. So very good there. Kamari, Valiant Guardian, another new card. 4 mana for a 3/3 with Vigilance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a woman counter on Kamari and tap target creature an opponent controls. Then you may have Kamari become a copy of that creature, except its name is Kamari, Valiant Guardian, and has Vigilance in this ability. So you can make it a copy of opponent's creatures, which is great because a lot of opponent's creatures are going to have higher power than 3/3. So at the very least, you are getting higher power with Kamari, but sometimes you may get a good attack trigger on your creature, or a good deals combat damage trigger, or just a good static effect to have on the battlefield, right? That's something good to know and good to have. Luminousroodmoth, 4 mana, 3/4, and flying. Great reprint here to make it so that creatures you control without flying, when they die, re-enter with flying counters. That's fantastic for your, your summons that don't have flying, right? They die, they sacrifice themselves, and they'll come right back and restart the whole process. That's pretty cool. Rampant Rejuvenator, 4 mana for a 0/0, but it enters with 2 woman counters, and then when it dies, you search your library for up to X basic lands or X is its power, put them on the battlefield, and shuffle. This is really great in decks that sacrifice lots of creatures to immediately get the value, kind of make it an explosive vegetation on a creature. Or decks that can cheat it out is pretty great, but in this deck, it's kind of slow, right? We don't really have a way to guarantee to kill it. It's just a blocker at this point. So sure, we can proliferate it, but it's not amazing. So something to think about there. Next, we have another new summon, Summon Yojimbo. That's probably the funnest one to say. 5/5 with Vigilance for 4 mana, and has 4 chapters. When you first play it, it's going to exile target artifact, enchantment, or tapped creature and opponent controls, which is great. 2 and 3 have until your next turn. Creatures can't attack unless their controller pays 2 for each of those creatures. They can't attack you. And then 4, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of opponents who control a creature with power 4 or greater. So 4 is really not amazing. You can continuously keep this on 2 and 3. That's kind of ideal because then you're just not going to be attacked. It's a little bit of a pillow 40 effect. And if you can redo number 1 a bunch, that's where the money's at, right? If you can remove all the counters off of this and have it start it back at 1. Very cool card there. Waka, Devoted Guardian, 4 mana for 4/4, reach and trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target artifact that player controls and put a 1/1 counter on Waka. Then, at the beginning of your end step, if a counter was put on Waka this turn, you put a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control. So what's great is that, this works pretty well with Waka and your commander. Your commander may put a counter on Waka already during combat, and it doesn't even need to deal damage to a player to do stuff, but even if not, it has trample, so it's easy to deal damage and get a counter on it. So very solid there. Next is the alternate commander of the deck, Yuna, Grand Summoner, 4 mana for a 1/5 human cleric. You can tap her to add 1 mana of any color. When you next cast a creature spell, it enters with 2 additional 1/1 counters, which is nice. Then it has whenever another permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you may put that number of 1/1 counters on target creature. So this works super well with these enchantment sagas, or the creature sagas, excuse me, because when they go to the battlefield, they're going to have 3-4 lore counters on them, and so you're going to be able to put 3 or 4 1/1 counters on a target creature, which is really great, and something this deck loves to do a lot. So great with the deck, great with what it wants to do. Next is a brand new card as well, another creature saga. 5 mana for a 5/5 with haste, and it has the same lore ability for all 3 counters. Choose one at random. Combine powers. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Defense. Put a shield counter on target creature. You gain 3 life. Or fight. This creature fights up to 1 target creature and opponent controls. And it happens randomly. So you can't really choose this one, what you're going to do with it. But it's still kind of cool. And I like it a lot. It's potential removal. Especially for, earlier on in the game. It's buffing something up a lot or giving a shield counter to something, and either way you have 2 different counters you're putting on stuff and 2/3 chance to do that, and the third one is removal, so always good to have that. Next one is the last creature saga of the deck. Summon Valifor, 5 mana for a 5/4 flyer. First chapter has each opponent chooses a creature with the greatest mana value among creatures they control. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. So the big, strong removal part there, or I guess control part there. Tempo, whatever you want to call it. And then 2, 3, and 4 all have tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. So your opponents are not going to like this card. They are not, especially if you can keep this around for a long time. They're going to hate it and promptly remove it, which is good. You want your creatures to, pull removal. Next is Suncorch Regent, 5 mana for 4/3 flyer. Whenever opponent casts a spell, get a 1/1 counter and gain a life. So very strong in Commander games. I've seen this card get way out of control. It's not a card you want to spend removal on, but a card you eventually have to spend removal on, and it's very nice. We got Bane of Progress to deal with more artifacts and enchantments, and then Sin, Unending Cataclysm, a brand new card. 7 mana for a 5/5 with flying and trample. As Sin enters, remove all counters from any number of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, and Sin enters with X 1/1 counters on it, where X is twice the number of counters removed this way. When Sin dies, put its counters on target creature you control, then shuffle this card into its owner's library. So super cool there, and a brand new card, fun new commander to build around, but pretty neat with the deck as well. Moving on to spells, we have an Offer You Can't Refuse, so solid counter there. Path to Exile, good removal. Destroy Evil is nice because you can either remove an enchantment or a creature with toughness 4 or greater, so it's always nice to have some of that selection there. Farseek, fantastic ramp in the deck. Protection Magic is a new spell, 2 mana. You put a shield counter on up to 3 target creatures. And I really love that they fix shield counters. It used to be where, if you had multiple shield counters on one creature, it didn't matter. You would only, anytime it got dealt damage, you would lose all shield counters, but now you only lose 1. So this definitely really is nice. Helps prevent it from being destroyed as well. Pull from Tomorrow to draw X cards and discard a card. 3 visits as more ramp. Collective Effort is neat. You can choose 1 or more, and you tap an untapped creature you control to choose more, right, for each one. So you destroy a target creature with power 4 or greater, destroy an enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. So minimum, you can put a 1/1 counter on all your creatures, and maybe destroy an enchantment or a creature power 4 or greater. Nice. It's pretty nice to have. Endless Detour, interesting card to have, and it's a removal spell, but they get to essentially put it wherever it's best for them, right? Whether it's for on top or bottom of their library. I'm usually not the biggest fan of those cards, but it does target a spell, a non-land permanent, or a card in a graveyard, so it can work for stopping your opponent for that turn, right? Doing a big play. So it's not terrible at all, but not the best card. Inspiring Call is great for a 1/1 counter deck, and you can draw a few cards off of it as well. Yuna's Whistle as a new card. Reveal cards on top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. When you reveal a creature card this way, put X 1/1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the mana value of that card. So very cool there. It can be 1, it could be 2, it could with Walking Ballista, it can also be 0. So we have a lot of lower mana value stuff. We have a few 4s and 5s. And then of course if you get Sen, that's a 7 counters. Yuna's Decision, also a new card, 4 mana, choose 1, sacrifice a creature. If you do, draw a card, then you may put a creature card and or a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. And the other one is return 1 or 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this is great. I mean, if you have a cheap Mana Dork and you have a really big card like Sen, or maybe you have a Creature Saga, which is going to die next turn anyways, and the big counter isn't worth doing. maybe you just sacrifice it to put another card on the battlefield for free, or cheat it out for 1 or 2 more mana, right? And you're also drawing a card, so it kind of helps out as well. But also gets some of your creature sagas out of your graveyard, or some of your creatures that were removed out of your graveyard. So something to think about there. Damning Verdict, destroys all creatures with no counters on them, is pretty good. It's not as good of a one-sided of a board wipe as you might think. A lot of decks use 1/1 counters. A lot of decks have other kinds of counters that they deal with as well, so something to think about. Promise of Loyalty, though, a great removal and board wipe spell. Pretty much making it so your opponents can't attack you with their best creatures, and they have to start back at 0. Usually you're not playing this if you already have a good board as well, but really great to have. And then like maybe play another creature that turn if you have enough mana to get some value off of it. And then this deck also comes with Farewell, which is one of the most annoying removals or board wipes, excuse me. But it's very strong. Everflowing Chalice is great in here. That's, you know, you're going to be able to proliferate it up, so very solid. Blitzball Stadium, when it enters support X, it's X in a blue, to cast, and then it has 3 and tap it until end of turn. Target creature gains whenever it deals combat damage to a player. Draw a card for each kind of counter on it, and it can't be blocked this turn. So pretty much you get, you know, you get a lot of support for having multiple different kinds of counters, which is great in that Capenna deck. Perry, the Pulverizer. Perry, the Platypus. No. Soul Ring is in the deck. Arcane Signets also in the deck. Those are both great cards to have. Enchantments, Hardened Scales. This is also another one that kind of goes with the Infinite, I think. Sphere Grid is a new card. 1 mana and a green. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And then creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have Reach and Trample. So great counter generation here, but also buffing up all your creatures with counters by giving them Trample. Always nice to have. Summoner Sending, also a new card, 2 mana. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature from a graveyard. If you do, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Put a 1/1 counter on it, or if the exiled mana value is 4 or greater. This is neat. I would say it's graveyard hate, but it's also like, it's not the best graveyard hate. I wouldn't really count it as graveyard hate because you're only doing it once during each of your end steps. You can't do it at instant speed. It's not the best. It's only getting 1 card at a time, and it can get you a lot of value throughout a game, but it's really not the best card. So something to think about. Together Forever, another reprint, and when it enters you support 2, and choose target creature with a counter on it for 1 mana. When that creature dies, return it to its owner's hand. So it's a good way to get, you know, your enchantment sagas back to your hand after they die, and be able to replay them. So that's also good there. Bred for the Hunt makes it so that whenever creature you control with a +1/+1 counter gives combat damage to the player, you may draw a card, which is neat. But we're not always running +1/+1 counters in the deck, so you know, we may not have synergy with that on the battlefield quite yet. So this can be a dead draw, but it does draw more cards. So it is a good consideration for maybe cards we might take out. Fight Rigging, I love this card. Hideaway 5, and beginning of combat on your turn, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control. Then if you control a creature of power 7 or greater, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So very good way to quickly be able to cheat something out, but also just buffs your creatures every turn, or one of your creatures every turn. So great to have there. Resourceful Defense, 3 mana for an enchantment. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters in target permanent you control. And then you can pay 5, move any number of counters from target permanent you control onto a second target permanent you control. So this is great too. If you want to pay the 5 mana, you could remove all the lore counters from enchantment saga or creature saga you have to just a random creature you control. Doesn't have to be an enchantment saga or creature saga. It could just be any creature. So that's kind of nice there. Kind of reset their ticking clock. Path of Discovery, great to have. Whenever a creature you control enters and explores, so you can be putting cards in the graveyard that maybe aren't as useful, or you can be drawing lands into your hand. It's always great to have there. Inexrable Tide, proliferating each spell you cast is also nice to have as well. And then you got 37 lands. No crazy lands in here, as far as I'm concerned. Nesting Grounds is a great reprint to have to move counters from a permanent you control to another target permanent, which is always nice. Also works well with your Generous Patron. Right, you can move a lore counter onto one of your opponent's creatures. Yeah, nothing really else stands out to me though. Pretty generic. But let's go into these 10 cards we're going to take out. 10 cards we're going to add into the deck. And first off, we are removing Altered Ego. Altered Ego is just a 4-mana clone spell that you can add some counters to it. It's not really the most fun card in a deck. Like, it's just say, hey, whatever you're playing, like I'll play that too. If you like those kind of cards, you can keep this in, but you have to pay more mana to give it a counter. A lot of times these days for those like clone effects, they're 4 mana and you also get an upside, right? This one you have to pay into the upside, so not as good. You don't always have to pay into it. You maybe have other ways to give it counters, but still not the best. And then we also removed Lord Jiskel Guado. We don't really need a ton more card draw. We can draw cards with our commander. We have a couple other mass card draw spells in the deck that, you know, we don't have to put so much mana into. And this one is just a bit slow, right? Easy to remove as well. Rampant Rejuvenator, we already talked about. It stays in the battlefield a lot longer than you want it to, and doesn't really do a whole lot for us there. I end up taking out Sin. Sin doesn't really synergize super well with the deck, just because like it's just a big beat stick at the end of the day. 7 mana, 12/12 Flying Trample, or 7 mana, 15/15 Flying Trample. It doesn't really do a whole lot. Sure, it's a creature with counters. It's going to deal damage and maybe draw us a card, but for 7 mana, you know, we want to do a lot more than that. It just does. It's too slow. It's just a big creature that's just waiting to be removed. And then sure, it has an ability on it when it gets removed to put the counters on another creature. But if you get board wiped after spending all your whole turn to cast this, it's not going to be, you know, great. Tireless Tracker also took out. We don't really need to investigate. And you know, sure, it gives itself counters when you do sacrifice the clues, but I don't know. We don't need that in this deck. I also took out Endless Detour just because it gives your opponent that choice, right, to put it on the top or the bottom. And yeah, that's why I took this one out. Protection Magic, I went ahead and took out as well, just because there's a lot of board wipes that maybe don't destroy. They might give -X/-X, or they may, you know, make you sacrifice 13 creatures, or like Farewell, maybe exile all your creatures, right? So it doesn't really protect against that. It maybe gives you blockers in a situation, but it doesn't do enough for me to warrant it keeping it in the deck, in my opinion. Because you really want this to fill a protection slot, and if it's not going to do that 100% of the time, or even, you know, 80% of the time, you know, then it's probably not worth it, right? It's going to be disappointing most of the time. You'd probably use it for more combat shenanigans to save your creatures or whatever, rather than actual protection spell. Bread for the Hunt I took out just because it can be inconsistent from time to time. Summoner Sending I also took out. You don't really have any other graveyard hate in this deck, and I would definitely recommend adding some in, especially if your pod has a lot of graveyard decks that synergize well with that. But yeah, it doesn't do a whole lot. You're getting a 1/1 per turn, maybe with a counter, right? It doesn't always have to be a counter, and if you're not getting that counter, it's not really synergizing with your deck that well. So something to think about there. And then Temple of the False God, I just took out a land. Temple of the False God, I'm not one of the people who like always cuts that in a deck, but a lot of our creatures are kind of low to the ground in this deck, and so we don't really need Temple of the False God to give us a little bit extra mana ramp for the risk that it provides. So I don't think it's the best in this deck, but it is a good card, and could be good in some other decks. Now, as far as like what we're going to add in, I decided to go into more of a Creature Saga route with this deck, adding 5 more Creature Sagas, some other creatures, and a couple enchantments here to help with our commander. Let's go over the cards that aren't brand new. Falco Spara we're adding in. He's really great with the deck. 3/3 Flying Trample. When he enters the battlefield with a shield counter on it, so it's something you can proliferate right away. Then you go look at the top card of your library anytime, and you can cast spells on the top of your library by removing a counter from a creature you control in addition to paying their other costs. So what's great about this is you can remove any kind of counter. It can be a shield counter from Falco, it can be a +1/+1 counter, it can also be a lore counter from one of your creature sagas. So I definitely made this deck to, make it so you're going to draw at least one creature saga a game. That's kind of the idea. This deck comes with 4 or 5, and I added 5 more. And so you want to draw 1 a game. If you have 2 or 3 a game, that's really cool. I think these cards are so cool, and the more you have, the more unique and fun your deck is going to be. And Falco's Power works really well with them. Kami Whispered Hopes fits the 1/1 counter theme as well, but is also a solid ramp piece, right? It gets you X mana of any one color, and then as you continue to grow it and grow other creatures, then you're going to be able to get bigger and bigger stuff or more things at once. We are adding a couple of high mana value cards here in the deck, some top end. Also added Kutsil, Malamet Exemplar, making it so our opponents can't cast spells in our turn, so they can't counter our stuff, they can't remove our things during combat, and then as whenever one or more creatures you control with power greater than its base power deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So it's more card draw here. With the 1/1 counter theme, works pretty well, but also a great static ability as well. And then we have the 5 different summons. We'll just go in order, I guess. Bahamut is one of the rarest from the new set. It's 9 colorless, or 9 if anything, and has 4 counters. It's a 9/9 flyer. The first and second destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. So already, immediately, you're getting rid of a non-land permanent. If you can, then you can proliferate the same turn to get rid of another non-land permanent, and then if you can remove counters, you just kind of back and forth. So something to think about there. The third counter draws you 2 cards. It's also something that you could repeat by removing counters and adding counters. And then 4th chapter is it deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. So it burns your opponent. So this isn't as important as the other ones, but late in the game, we're probably going to have a bunch of, non-creature permanent, permanents on the battlefield, right? Whether it's lands or creatures or enchantments, we're going to have a few. So this can be a game ender a little bit, for sure. Summon Fenrir is really neat. 3 mana for a 3/2. The first one searches your library for a basic land, puts it on the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle. So if you can repeat that, that's very nice. Second one, it has when you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So great, works exactly with the deck how we want it to work. And then the third is draw a card if you control a creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. So it does replace itself potentially, but also not always. It's not a guaranteed replacement effect. But we do have +1/+1 counters, so maybe we will have the strongest power creature. Maybe we won't. Next one is Summon Good King Mog the 7th. 5 mana for a 4/4 flying lifelinker, so some lifelink added to the deck to keep us alive a bit longer. The first chapter creates 1/2 white Moogle creature tokens. Then the next 2 chapters, whenever you cast a non-creature spell this turn, create a copy. That's a copy of non-saga tokens. So essentially, you're probably going to be making copies of those Moogles. And then the 4th chapter puts 2 +1/+1 counters on each other Moogle you control. So very cool there. You're going to make a lot of tokens with lifelink, and just they're good blockers or be able to gain you some life. That's nice to have. We do have a good amount of non-creature spells, whether that is enchantments or, the instant sorceries that this deck has. Not the most amazing creature saga in the deck, but is one that does, work pretty decently, I would say. Then, of course, we have Summon Knights of Round. 8 mana for a 3/3 indestructible. 5 chapters on this one, and the first 4 all create 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens. So you're making a ton of tokens here. And then, at the very last one, other creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. Put an indestructible counter on each of them. So you could actually, if you wanted to, fast forward this one, move a lore counter from one creature onto this one, hit that 5th one, beginning of combat, give all your creatures +2/+2 and indestructible with your commander's ability, and then this one sacrifices itself. But at that point, you have a lot of different things on the battlefield. So, very cool card. I thought it would be fun to add it in here. Then we've got Summon Primal Garuda, 4 mana for a 3/3. This creature deals 4 damage to target tapped creature and opponent controls, so it's removal on a stick, which is nice. Then chapters 2 and 3, another target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains flying until end of turn. So it works pretty well with our deck, our commander's ability. It wants to get in and deal damage, and giving a creature flying helps with that as well. So yeah, definitely good there with the creatures. And then for enchantments, I added Broker's Ascendancy. It's going to give each of our creatures a +1/+1 counter on all of our end steps. And then Innkeeper's Talent is going to add +1/+1 counters during each of our combat. Then it's going to give our creatures ward for the next one, and then it's going to double the kind of counters we put on stuff. So this doesn't work as well with the enchantment creatures, but if we're in more of a end game that's +1/+1 counter heavy, we can go with Innkeeper's Talent for sure. But yeah, those are the cards I'm taking out. Those are the cards I'm putting in. Hope you enjoyed this review and upgrade of the Counter Blitz Precon. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like the content and want to see more. And I'll be back next week with another Final Fantasy Deck Tech. Take care. Bye.